Okay, how you doing? We're going to talk about solving absolute value equations and what the difference between an equation for an absolute value is and what the difference between if I just had an expression. So, if someone came up to you and you've heard probably before that, oh, what's the absolute value of this? Okay? So, an example that a teacher might say to you that's an expression and not an equation is what happens if I have the absolute value of -4. And I just want to simplify that expression. Well, simplifying absolute values is not the same exact thing as solving an equation of absolute value. Simplifying an absolute value is just applying the idea that an absolute value is a distance from 0. So, how far away from 0 is -4? Well, it is 4 units away from 0. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. It's the one way that we as mathematicians can talk about distance without having to write something, an equation that says, oh, the distance of -4, how far away is it from 0? So we just write the absolute value bars, and then it's implied that we were talking about a distance from 0 and nothing else. So that's an expression. Another expression I might have, a teacher might give you is, what is the absolute value of 5 minus 9? Okay, so they'll give you something now with orders of operations. Well, 5 minus 9 in this case, all right, you have to do that first, so you do what's inside the absolute value if you can, and you say, okay, what is 5 minus 9? And 5 minus 9 is -4, so you go, okay, -4, what's the absolute value of -4? And some people will tell you that an absolute value always has to be positive. I think that's a shortcut, and if you learn that way and you don't learn that it's always going to be, how far from 0 are you? Always ask yourself that question. Don't just sit there and say, oh, it's positive. How far from 0 are you? So I have -4 is how many units away from 0, and it's exactly 4 units. So I say 4 units from 0. And the reason the teacher tells you it has to be positive is they're correct, but distance can never be negative. So therefore, that's why they're telling you it must always be positive. But the question you need to ask yourself is, how far from 0 am I? And in this case, -4 is 4 units from 0, which is why I get 4 in this case. Simplifying is not the same, and it's a little bit different of a tweak of a question. But when I take a look at this, okay, and I'm going to do one more thing here, and I'm going to say the absolute value of -5. And I'm going to draw a number line in here. Okay, and I'm going to go, this is 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay? I have this distance, which is right here. Okay? And all I'm simply asking you is, what is that distance when I'm trying to simplify something? And in this case, that distance is going from left to right, okay, it is 5 units. So I get 5 units. All right? Now, let's take a look at what happens if this wasn't the absolute value of -5, but what happens if I had the absolute value of 5? Okay? The absolute value of 5, going off to the right here, okay, so I have this, all right, and I have that this is 5. Well, that distance is going to be equidistant to, which means the same distance as, -5. So, whenever I talk about absolute values, you have to understand that there's always a distance left of 0 that's equidistant to a distance that is right of 0. So when simplifying, okay, what you need to know is that the absolute value of -5 is equivalent to the absolute value of 5, and that will for always ever be, because we're talking about a distance from 0. And just because 5 is written to the right of 0 and -5 is written to the left doesn't mean anything when we're talking about a distance. That is simply talking about the idea of simplifying. It's just asking you, how far from 0 are you? Let's talk about the equations now. Okay? So, the equations are going to have the variable inside of the absolute value and a number outside. Okay? So, if I have the absolute value of some x, and I say it's equivalent to 4, okay? First off, you must always have your absolute value being equivalent to a positive number. Because, okay, when we're talking about expressions, I am now saying to you that whenever I plug in for x and simplify this expression, it must be equivalent to what's over here. And we just talked about absolute values always having a positive value. Well, that's the same case here, but now what I'm asking you is, what number can I take or numbers can I take the absolute value of to make positive 4? So, again, number line. Okay? Notice 0 is in the middle. Okay? I want to find all the distances I can from 0 that will give me 4. So, when taking a look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I count to the left 4, that's a distance of 4 to the left of 0. What I find is that's negative 4. Okay? And if I count to the right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a distance of 4 units as well, and that's now positive 4. So what I have here is I have a distance of negative 4 and I have a distance of positive 4. So these are both 4. Okay? Those are my two. Now my two values that I can plug in are, I'm saying to you, what are the numbers that are 4 units away from 0? And that's what I'm asking you here. What are the numbers that are exactly 4 units away from 0? So x can either be negative 4, okay, or x can be positive 4. And then that's my answer. So the idea here is asking yourself, what number could be, okay, could be in here that would give me a value of positive 4. And the hard part here is you have to remember that absolute value is talking about a distance from 0. So in this case, I'm talking about what are my units away from 0. So I have 4 to the left and I have 4 to the right. So my answer here is x could be negative 4 because the absolute value of negative 4 is 4 units. And the absolute value of 4 is also 4 units. Let's bump this up a little bit here. Okay, so the way we can bump this up is you got to remember that idea. And that idea is I'm taking the absolute value of something and asking you what expression or what number could I plug in there that gives you, okay, that value. So here we go. So what I have here is I've got the absolute value, and I'm just going to change a little bit and call it x plus 1. And I'm going to say that that must be equivalent to, let's do 7, okay? So here's the thing. I am doing something to my x now. I am adding a number. I'm subtracting. In this case, I'm adding a 1. But the idea doesn't change, okay? This function, this expression must still give me an answer that is 7 units away from 0. So the same thing applies here, okay? That I must have something here that's 0, okay? I must have a point that is 7 units away from 0. Well, if I go left 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that's negative 7. If I go right 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's positive 7. Okay, so I have that these are my two equidistant values, which are negative 7 and 7. However, okay, my equidistant values must be are being represented by this expression of x plus 1. So this expression of x plus 1 must simplify to either negative 7 or it must simplify to positive 7. So how am I going to figure out what they are? Well, let's make an equation. The saying that, okay, well this x plus 1 must be equivalent to negative 7, or this x plus 1 must be equivalent to positive 7. And the reason for that is I want to know the number I have to plug in here that's going to make this whole thing in here negative 7, and I also want to know what is the other one that could be my or statement that says, okay, or it could have been positive 7, because if I took the absolute value of negative 7, it gives me 7. If I took the absolute value of negative 7, positive 7, it gives me 7. So here we go. I come up here and I go, okay, let's solve for x. So I minus 1, I get x equals negative 8. Okay, and in this one, I minus 1, and I get x equals 6. So, I am solving for the input, okay, into the x variable that simplifies to the numbers that will give me a distance of 7 away from 0. So when I plug in a number for x, it better give me that when I add 1 to it, 7 or negative 7. So in this case, negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. Take the absolute value of it, and the absolute value is how far away from 0. So I get negative 7. We've already just talked about that is 7 units away from 0. Throw in the 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So therefore it's simplified to one of these values that is 7 units away from 0. And therefore I know that I've solved for this correctly. Going on, going to do another. The next one I want to talk about is what happens if I put a multiplier on top of it, okay? And I think I might add that to the next video, so, open up my next video, and I'm going to call it what happens if I put a multiplier or addition outside of the absolute value, but this one is just what happens if I do something inside the absolute value.